You're listening to Women Are the Journey with your hostess with the mostest. That's right, me, Audrey Groeschel. We've got all your journeying here. We've got the story of the shift, where women entrepreneurs talk about their own unique journey on the road of owning a business as a woman. We have the journey of Chew on This, where I talk about the masculine structures of our society, how they hinder women in particular, but all of us in general. We'll open up the potentials of what a balance of feminine and masculine can give to us and to our planet. Join me as we explore the infinite possibilities of a journey of balance and transformation. You know how you have conversations with people and the time just flies because you've just had such a great time? Yep, that's what we're going to get today, everybody. Today we've got life coach, author, hellraiser, Andrea Owen. She is passionate about empowering women to value themselves and fiercely love who they are, who helps high-achieving women let go of perfectionism, control, and isolation, and choose courage and confidence instead. She's helped thousands of women manage their inner critic to create loving connections and live their most kick-ass life. She is a proud author of 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life, BS-free wisdom to ignite your inner badass and live the life you deserve. And her most recent book, which was released this January, How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, 14 Habits That Are Holding You Back from Happiness. When she's not juggling her full coaching practice or hosting retreats, Andrea is busy competing in triathlons, chasing her 10-year-old son and 8-year-old daughter, or making out with her husband, Jason. How cool is that? She's also a retired roller derby player. I mean, come on. She skated under the name Veronica Vane. That's so awesome. Okay, but see, here's the thing. Because she's just released this book, the How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, 14 Habits That Are Holding You Back from Happiness, she is doing something really cool that starts today, January 22nd. She's offering a free month-long book study based on the book. Each week, she's going to dig into new topics so that you can gain massive self-awareness, create new, more empowering habits for yourself, and just generally feel happier. She's going to be guiding you every step of the way, and all you need to do is purchase the book, and then I'm going to include the link in her bio so that you can sign up to start this book study group. And trust me, you're going to want to do it. So I want everybody to enjoy the time with Andrea just like I did. It was fabulous. Welcome in. Howdy, everybody. It's Audrey Groeschel here, and we are in for another episode of Women Are the Journey, and we are talking to Andrea Owen today for her story of the shift. And I'm really excited because we get to talk about her book and we get to hear her story, and there's so much going on, so we want to get right into it. And I want to welcome Andrea in. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Audrey. I'm so glad to be here.
I am so glad to have you here. I'm super excited to hear your stories. Stories are the best thing, really.
Stories are great, yes. And
Yes.
Lord knows we all have a lot of them.
That's an understatement. All right, so to get us going, I want to start with getting to know where you are right now in your journey. And because really that's the reason that we're here, is to know that part of where you are right now. So can you tell us a little bit about where you are right now?
So are you more interested in just general or the struggle?
Well, like the struggle of right now, or like where you are?
Yeah, well, where I am geographically is I'm in North Carolina, and we're recording this kind of in the middle of January, and I'm on my book tour. And why that is relevant is because I'm home right now. I had a week in New York, and then I was in Chicago, and I'm home for a couple of days.
Wow.
And then I do the West Coast, then I circle back, and then I do a couple of cities near me. And the reason it's relevant is because, people have asked me, is it hard to write a book? And my answer is, for me, no. I identify as a writer. I have been my entire life.
Yeah.
I spent a decade not writing at all, but that was, when I lost myself, and we can talk more about that. writing is my creative outlet. It's how I process things. It's my own therapy and healing.
Cool.
So writing the book isn't hard. It's the promotion of the book and stepping into the spotlight and sharing that art with everyone else and having people critique it and showing up at book events where I'm taking the risk of people. I kind of half joke that I'm equally terrified everyone will show up and that no one will show up to these book signings, where I get to meet people, because I'm a podcaster and a writer. Maybe I chose those two things so I could hide and still do my work.
Ooh.
So that's for me where I really have to push myself out of my comfort zone and kind of hit my own upper limit stuff, as the author Gay Hendricks has coined. And yeah, that's my struggle right now, is actually these kind of interviews are no problem, but it's the actually getting up in front of people and hugging and all of that. I'm it's so much feeling. I love it, but it's so uncomfortable for me. It's still such a learning process.
Now, I have a question though. Do you coach still?
I do. I do take private clients, and I take very few at this point in my career. And I'm all in. We do some deep work. So
awesome.
Right now, I have a smaller practice than I used to.
Yeah. So really what you're at right now is, you're still podcasting?
Yes.
And
I'm almost at 100 episodes.
Okay. Time to step it back into that, huh? So basically what you're at is you're at the book tour, and you've got 2 books under your belt. Mm-hmm. And then you are touring, which is super fun. And I can totally relate to all of that. I'm a writer and all that myself, so I can completely understand. And the coaching just a little bit with select few. So I just want to be clear on where you're at right now in the journey, and before we step into your initial moments. So are you ready to go?
I am.
All right.
So excited.
Cool. Then I am going to let you go. I'm just going to ask the question then, what was that first crisis moment that brought you towards this direction?
When you first were talking, and I knew, this question was coming, I immediately knew what that was. And if anybody's ever heard my story or followed me, they probably know what that was. But I'm going to actually back up for more than a decade before that story.
Cool.
And there was a period of 18 months when I was a teenager that were very pivotal, and that it really, in retrospect, because it's usually in retrospect,
yes.
That's when my unraveling happened. And so it started when I was 17. I was a senior in high school, and I got pregnant and had an abortion. And it was a decision that I wasn't sure I wanted to make. And I unfortunately could not talk to my mom about it.
Yeah.
She had always told me when I was a teenager that if I got pregnant out of wedlock, that they would send me to Canada to live with my aunt, who was a Catholic nun, and I would live in the convent with her, and I would have the baby there. And then I would come home and all would be fine. And my mom was not the person who gave idle threats. My mom followed through.
Wow.
And that was her way. That was her best shot at, me trying to scare me to not have premarital sex and just to use protection. And it didn't work. And unfortunately, we actually were using protection. It's a long story, but I ended up pregnant and could not tell my mom about it. And I desperately wanted to. And so the only people that knew were my boyfriend at the time, his mom, whom I didn't know very well, my cheerleading coach, and my best friend. And I made that decision. And I wasn't sure in my heart that that's what I wanted to do. And so I carried that, for 20 some years before I finally, when I was in, I was 40 when I finally decided, I think I regret that decision. And I'm still am I'm pro-choice, and I believe that it is a woman's right to choose. But as a 17-year-old girl, I wish that I would have had somebody close to me to walk me through that. I needed somebody, and I couldn't. So then a little bit after that, my parents split up, and I didn't even know they were having any problems. And my dad also announced that he was going into recovery for alcoholism. I didn't even know he was an alcoholic.
Wow.
So as you can probably see a pattern in my family that we didn't talk about the hard stuff.
Yeah. There were big elephants in your rooms, weren't there?
Big elephants, that were not talked about. We were a happy family. We loved the hell out of each other, but hard stuff, no.
Wow.
So then I was 19 and I was date raped.
Oh my.
And it was a non-violent thing that happened, but it was also non-consensual. So
Right.
it took me, again, another 2 decades to really name that for what it was.
Mm.
And I had always thought it was my fault. So those four things happened in a short amount of time. I was still very young and didn't know how to process and handle that kind of trauma.
Yeah.
At that time, I wouldn't have even called it trauma. It just was stuff that happened.
Right. It's
And
life. It's life going on with the
it was just
why.
like,
Yeah. It's just life. This is what we do.
it just is what happened. And the person that I had been dating from when I was 17, it was actually the man that I was pregnant with when I was a teenager. He had seen me through all of that stuff. He was not the person that date raped me, by the way, for what it's worth. But we ended up getting married, and we were about 2 years into our marriage. I was 31 at this point, and he had an affair with our neighbor and got her pregnant.
Oh no.
And we had just been discussing trying to conceive our first child, because at that point we'd been together for 13 years.
Wow.
I was very close to his family. His family was my family. And we split up. And it was, oh, Audrey, like a memoir is coming, like the whole story. He was basically living a double life. He had been lying to her
Wow.
about me and lying to me about her, and it all exploded and really tore the family apart as well. It didn't just affect us, it affected everybody.
It never
And
does.
it was awful, and it was one of the worst times in my life. And then pretty much as soon as we split up, I did probably the most unhealthy thing I could have done at the time, as I started dating.
Because that's always the solution to everything.
Solution, right? Let me know how to find a man to solve my problems.
Exactly.
And that was a pattern of mine. And so I met someone whom I thought was Mr. Right. He was charming and handsome on the first date, although something told me on the first date that something wasn't right. But of course I didn't listen.
Right.
And I ended up 9 months into that relationship. He was actually addicted to opioids, who had lied about having cancer. He had fabricated a story about having cancer. He had conned me out of about $8,000.
Wow.
I also was pregnant. And so that, Audrey, was my on the floor. And I know a lot of people have their fetal position like on the bathroom floor. Yeah. I was in my bedroom, and the bedroom was empty because I was moving. He had convinced me to move away with him. And so I quit my job that I loved. I had broken the lease of my apartment to move away with him. And he actually did go away to rehab when we found out I was pregnant. And I thought let me give him a chance, and I thought he would get sober and we could raise this baby together. And he met someone in rehab and I was out of money, and this woman had a lot of money. She had a trust fund. So he was a con man, basically.
Yeah, he was a grifter. Awesome.
Yeah, so I was pregnant and decided I was going to do it by myself, and he and I broke up. And that was when I decided to take responsibility for my life and just accountability for my own stuff. And I had spent my entire life blaming and really trying to control everyone else. So if they would just get their shit together, then I would be happier. And then they would be happier too. They just didn't know it yet. And that was not working for me anymore.
I can't imagine why.
I know, right? I had one of those moments where I was like, maybe it's me. Not to say those guys didn't do crappy things to me. They did. They had poor behavior, but I had tolerated it. I had never listened to my intuition. I didn't know how to cope with life. I thought it was everyone else's job to make me happy, and to make me feel worthy and esteem me and all of these things. And it was the very first time in my life where I decided to take care of myself emotionally.
Well done. Oh yeah, of course it's terrifying. Oh yeah, that's so scary, that stuff. That's awesome. It's funny how it takes us so long to get to that point. So if you look at it from the initial at 17, it was 13 years before you sort of decided that it was your responsibility to take care of you.
Exactly. And, when I was 19 and I had been dating my ex-husband for a couple of years at that point, that's when my intuition started to whisper that this relationship was over, that I had outgrown him. He was very much a bad boy, getting in fights and, stealing beer and those things that I thought were cool when I was 17.
Right.
When I was 19, 20, and I'm like, maybe we should start to grow up. And he wasn't interested. And at that point, I was so close to his family. because my family had fallen apart and his family took me in and they were the most wonderful people. I was in love with them, and I knew consciously though that it would be more painful for me to lose them than it would be to lose him.
Right.
So that was the main reason that I stayed. And it was also dysfunctional and I was codependent and all of those reasons that many of us stay in relationships that we know aren't good for us.
Yeah, been there, done that. Yes, I get that. So then what happened at that point? So you sat down and decided in your fetal position that it was your responsibility to take care of you. And how did that go?
You mean like what did I do, or?
Well, I guess what did you do? How were you, like, what was your experience during that time, and how long did it really sort of take you to get to that a different step of that realization, I guess?
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, well, it's sort of ironic, like funny, not funny, how I really got pushed into working on myself. So the man that I had been dating that I said, went away to rehab,
Mm-hmm.
His mother had sent him to the Meadows, actually in Arizona. It's a well-known inpatient rehab center. And they have family week. And I went, as his pregnant girlfriend. And really, it was really great for me because I learned about love addiction. I knew I was codependent, but I had never, I was interested in personal development, like in theory, like I liked the idea of it.
Yeah.
I was not that interested in really shining the light on the stuff that hurt. I think that you really have to get to a place where you are ready. I call it like half-assing your personal development. That's what I was doing. I was reading the books, but it was just information.
Right.
Me.
You weren't implementing anything.
I wasn't applying at all. No. So when I did go to that rehab center, it was intense, and even though it was only for a short amount of time, but I listened and I took it in and I admitted a lot of my own faults and things that I had to take responsibility for. And so that's what it looked like. I came home from that and started going to Codependence Anonymous meetings. I went back to therapy and finally was listening to my therapist, even though she'd been telling me these same things for years. And I was ready. I was finally ready. And also just lots of books and workshops, and some of them were great. Some of them were really weird.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that, all of it, I really put myself on the fast track to getting my shit together, for lack of a better term. I sort of hate that term, but like,
no, but it's true. I mean, really, sometimes that's the best way to put it. It's completely applicable.
Yeah, that's what I did. Mm-hmm.
And I always say that because I have a very similar story to yours, and I was fast tracking myself as well. And I've always called it ripping the Band-Aid off. That there's no hesitation, that we rip the Band-Aid off and we look at it and we shine the light on it and we go through it and let's go.
Yep. Yeah, I think it looks different for everyone, but I think that for some of us, sounds like for both of us, that it's like this pivotal moment that happened where I had this like huge wake up call and decided to make a change. I don't think that has to be everyone's journey though. I don't think that you have to have this massive thing that happens.
Yeah.
It's just the way it looked for me.
Yeah, I totally understand. So what'd you do next? Where was the next crisis that took you into different steps? And really, I guess, where was the entrepreneurship? Where did that come in?
So the big, explosion in my life, that was in 2006 and into the very beginning of 2007. So 2007 was the year I really started healing. That was also the year my son was born. Mm-hmm. And then I met my current husband and we got married. He adopted my son because my ex-boyfriend, decided he didn't want anything to do with us. And then, my current husband and I had a child together. And then in 2011, I realized that it was a really great thing that I had healed from my codependence and my love addiction, but that was also around the time that my drinking started to pick up. And I had never identified as being a problem drinker until then. I do believe that I traded one addiction for the other. I was so proud of myself that I was, no longer symptomatic in my codependency and my love addiction, but really it was like almost like one day put one down, next day picked the other one up. And so for me, it was wine. I wasn't going out to bars and I had never gotten arrested or had a DUI or anything like that. it was a bottle of wine a night, every single night. And I knew, based on my father getting sober when I was 18, I knew what that meant, what a high functioning alcoholic looked like.
Right.
And that I also knew by doing my own research that if you identify as an alcoholic and you think that you are one, then we don't get better as much as we try.
Yeah.
We cannot moderate, that we just end up getting worse.
Yep.
And I knew where I was headed. So I quit drinking, and I have 6 years now. And
congratulations.
I wasn't really, thank you. It wasn't really a crisis. I didn't have a rock bottom in my drinking. My rock bottom was that moment in 2007. But I think that the drinking for me was just like, and, I was pretty far along in my personal development then. By the time I realized what was happening with my drinking, I only kept drinking for another couple of months. I was just kind of digging my heels in a little bit, like, no, don't take this away from me. This is my last thing I have. So, but I felt like such a hypocrite, and I had just launched Your Kick-Ass Life, which is my business. And so, yeah, all of that was happening. I had a brand new business. I had 2 little babies. My son was 3. My daughter was 1. And I just launched my business, and I got sober. So it was a lot to take in.
Yeah, that is a lot to take in. But I mean, seriously, because you'd already done so much work, it was sort of, I don't want to say an easy recognition for you, but a much easier recognition than the prior recognition.
I didn't need to get completely smashed over the head,
right,
like I had before.
Right.
And I think it's fair to say that it was an easy recognition. I wasn't happy about it. I didn't want to quit drinking.
I can't imagine why.
I was good at drinking.
You were a professional.
I loved to drink.
Yes.
Yeah, I loved to drink. And but again, I knew there's something about doing this work. And I don't care if you do it for a living. Like if you are active in your personal development and you know that you're doing something, there's a behavior that you're doing that is keeping you down and keeping you small and wreaking havoc on your life, that is a very uncomfortable place to be.
It is. I absolutely agree.
The worst.
Yes. All right. So that's really cool, though. I really like the fact that you caught yourself before you had to hit the rock bottom.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
I think that's brilliant. And so let's step into what happened with the business and where did you hit another crisis moment?
I think I'm running out of crises, but my son was diagnosed with autism, and so the day I got a contract for my first book was the same day my son's preschool teacher called and said, and she was a retired special education teacher who had opened up her own private preschool, so she knew, and she said, I've been wanting to tell you this for a couple of weeks, but I really think that you should get your son tested for autism. And I had kind of always known.
Right.
But it's not a phone call that is fun to get.
No.
Especially from someone that you trust.
Yeah.
And I had that moment of tunnel vision. I mean, you guys know.
Yeah.
Everything kind of slows down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And everything comes into like really sharp focus. And also, all the puzzle pieces kind of fell together. There was at the same time an element of relief and an element of total fear and dread and sorrow for this child.
Yeah.
And, but we got through it, and he's a lot better now. And by better, I mean, thankfully we had early intervention. He was only 4 at that time, I think. And he's in 4th grade now. He's 10. And so, yeah, that was probably the last crisis that I had. Oh no, and then my dad died last year. So that was another crisis.
Yes, I'm very sorry to hear that. That is never an easy one right there.
No, it wasn't. It was sudden too. I was in the middle of writing my second book, and we got word at the end of September of 2016 that he was sick. They were doing tests, and they knew he was really anemic. And then maybe a week later, they found out he had a rare form of leukemia that was slowly turning his bone marrow into scar tissue. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of it.
Wow.
Some really big word. It's supposed to be really painful. And he wasn't complaining. And he was dead on October 16th. So it was
That was quick.
fast and
That's
furious.
quick. And you did mention that in the book. I did read that, and I really admire the fact that you dropped everything, no matter how afraid you were to go. But you didn't let the elephant sit there in the room, and you just went and took yourself to your dad's side and spent his last time with him. And I admire that so very much. It's not an easy thing to do.
No, I think it's hard no matter what, whether you choose not to go and be with the person as they lie dying,
Yes.
or, whether you do or whether you don't, like, you're still going to face the grief. But I think for me, like, I went out when I found out he was sick, and I was not expecting to see him in as bad shape as he was. My brother had kind of warned me, but I didn't. I mean, you can't imagine your father, especially like, this person who I think for most of us is our hero and like the pillar of strength for most of us.
They're like larger. They're larger than life for us, for most girls at least.
For most girls, right? And even at 80 years old, he still was this man that I always remember. His nickname was Quick Hands on the tennis court. He played tennis almost his entire life up until the very end, and to see him in a wheelchair, like, I mean, and they had told me before I got there, because they had said he had about 6 months to live. And then they also said, it really depends on how fast his progression is. And I had just seen him in June, and he was fine.
Wow.
And so I saw him, and I immediately texted my brother, and I said, he does not have 6 months. I can guarantee you that. And he was gone in 2 weeks. And so
that's crazy.
I was home for a few days, and then I flew back to North Carolina. He was in San Diego, where I'm from. And just 4 days later, the hospice people called me, and they said, if you want to be here when he dies, you should come back. And so I had a decision to make, and I only had a few hours to make it. And there was a part of me, honestly, Audrey, that didn't want to go.
Yeah.
I justified it. I was just there.
Yeah.
I had said everything I needed to say to him.
Yeah.
I had family members telling me he's not lucid. He probably won't even know you're there. So if you do decide not to come, don't feel bad about it.
Right.
We understand. And I agonized over that decision. But the part of me that didn't want to go was the part of me that was afraid to feel that kind of grief, to watch this man die in front of me. Like, I didn't trust, and this has been a pattern of mine, I didn't trust that I could handle it.
Yeah.
I mean, this goes back to me being in my 20s. Like, I didn't trust I could handle anything. I needed other people to do it for me. And, there's a Pema Chodron quote that I say in the book, only to the extent that we open ourselves to annihilation over and over again is what is that is indestructible can be found within us.
I love that.
And I'm not quoting her perfectly, but that basically.
No, but I know which one you're talking about, because I like that one. I like it too.
And I went, and I got on a plane, and I went, and honestly, it was the most excruciating thing I've ever experienced in my life. Yeah. And it was just he and I when he died. And, I've birthed 2 children, and I know what that's like to have the joy of, and just that kind of feeling of like, all of a sudden there's another person in the room. And then also the opposite of like having this person slip away. And that rawness of emotion, that's life. Like, it's the most. I texted my husband after he died, and I said, it was excruciating and it was perfect. And he said, I don't understand what you mean. And I said, I don't think I can explain it.
No, unless you've done it, there's no real understanding. I don't think and I think that it's something that in a way that we miss in our society. It's real raw things like that, like birth and death. And it's become not a real thing. We see it on TV all the time, on movies that we watch, and it just happens. And how many people actually sit with their dying family or spouse or whatever and hold their hand while they pass?
It's interesting, in other cultures, they do.
Yeah.
I can't name them right now, but I know that in older cultures that have been around longer than America, they do. And I think that we have such an aversion to that type of grief. We don't know how to be with that kind of sorrow.
Yeah.
And it's so incredibly uncomfortable for everyone involved. And I think that that's why were so weird about it. And just being around the hospice nurses, those people that do that for a living,
Oh,
I mean,
they're
good
angels.
God, they are.
They are straight
They have
angels.
they're it takes a special type of person to do what they do. And
Amen.
there was a couple of them that I just were just so amazing, and they're just so okay with everything. They're just so
Yeah.
okay with it. And
Yes.
it's not that it's not just because it's become their job.
Right.
It's because it's just part of life. That's
Yeah.
just, to me, like how they look at it. And it was an experience that I'll treasure. And of course, I look back on it, it's still awful
Right.
and beautiful at the same time. But I'm
Yes.
so blessed that I got to help him, walk him home. I honestly think that he waited for me. My stepmother had just left 30 minutes prior. Her health wasn't the greatest at the time, and she went home to get some sleep. We both kind of knew that he probably wouldn't make it through the night. I think she was hoping that he would till the morning,
Hmm.
but 30 minutes later, he was gone. And I'm just honored that he allowed me to be there while he passed. Because he could have waited until I was asleep. He could have waited until I was gone.
Right. Right. And I think that that's one of the things out of the whole story that you have just shared, as far as from A to B or A to Z, you have just sort of given a perfect example of everything that you learned, which was you embraced the feeling, the uncomfortable, the fear, all of it. You stepped into it and allowed it to happen to you and sort of embraced it and walked with it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's walking through the fire, because I think for so long I was certain, I wasn't just afraid, I was certain that I would burn up in that fire, that
Yeah.
I would not survive that type of inferno, really. And I have now come to know that we do survive it. Like, that's resilience.
Yeah.
And we are actually fireproof. And I think that um, I didn't believe anyone that told me that. I was like, no, that's okay for other people. I know, or maybe, like, I believe you, but I don't want to test it out for myself. And I think
Yeah.
it's also changed me in that, before, I didn't want to be, I couldn't be with my own feelings, and I certainly couldn't be with yours.
Right.
So it's helped me to be a more compassionate and patient person too. I didn't have a whole lot of patience or compassion for other people, because I was so uncomfortable with their feelings and with my own. And so this whole 10 years plus has taught me that we are all just human, doing the best we can. We screw it up a lot, and all of us have pain.
I love that. That is so brilliant. And it's something that so many of us need to come to that realization. But we have to walk through our own fire to get to that.
True story. Yes.
All right. So let's get into the next part, which is, what do you do now? Like, if you see something coming, what are your best tips, tricks, whatever you want to call it? What helps you cope with something you see coming?
I think that for sure, just the self-awareness, I mean, you just named it, but I think that's a really huge win. So for
Yeah.
instance, when writing this second book, I knew that the promotion of the book is what's the hardest for me. I learned that with my first book, and I was sort of catapulted into the spotlight. I mean, not in a Tony Robbins type of way,
Right.
but still, like, a spotlight nonetheless.
Exactly.
More than what I was used to.
Right.
Lots of attention, lots of interviews like these, and I don't, contrary to popular belief, I don't like being the center of attention. I have a lot of energy, and I'm extroverted, but I'm not the person who feels at home. It's so weird to people, like, I feel at home on stage in front of 1,000 people. And I'm like, that is so bananas to me. Like, why? Like, I still am like, I don't know about that. And it's getting easier, but I knew it was coming. I could see that fear. I could see that train coming at me this second time around.
Right.
So I think the first step is to know what your triggers are, know where you get hooked, and know what trips you up, keeps you small, etc. And then having the people in your life that you've intentionally created relationships with, where you can talk to them about it and say, like, I know this, either it already happened, or I know that this is coming, and can you support me through this?
So important.
And asking for what you need. And I also, like for that example that I just gave, is I set intentions. Like, so for one of the things that I was doing is, the first time I wrote the book, I only did one city that I went to, and it was San Diego, because that's where I'm from.
Right.
And I knew that people would show up, and I also knew that 95% of those people, I would already know them. And
it was safe. It was totally safe.
And so this time I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do multiple cities and see what happens. And that's terrifying for me, because I'm equally afraid that people will show up and that people will not show up. And that's what's really hard for me. And I'm always really honest. I talk about it on my podcast that, again, writing the book isn't the hard part for me. It's getting up in front of people and showing my heart to everybody, like in person.
Right. Yeah. That's the hard part. That's raw right there.
For sure.
Yeah, that's absolutely raw feeling right there. I think those are great, great tips. I really appreciate that very much. And now let's step into the book. Here we are with that thing now.
Okay.
Let's talk about the book. So needless to say, when I found out I was going to interview, I went and ordered the book and was super excited. And I'm about halfway through it right now. And I have to say, my first thing right off the bat is I love your writing style. It's fun. It's light. It, keeps you engaged. There's no BS. You're just going. And I really appreciate your honesty throughout the book as well. I think that is really important, because so many self-help books out there, and I don't even like using the term self-help per se, but I mean, that's what it is. Right. But it just sounds so cliche, but so many just make it seem like it's just going to be easy. And you are completely honest in the fact that, look, this is going to be work, people. You're going to have to, rip that Band-Aid off. You have to look at yourself, and you have to deal with your pain, and you have to step into your feelings. And I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Continue. 'Cause I'll just jump in and start talking about that.
Okay.
Start yelling at people.
Well, I think it's great too, because you talk about the fact that it's a constant practice, that you're not perfect, that you haven't gotten through all of it, that you have to continue to deal with X, Y, and Z, that you deal with, for instance, the imposter complex, which so many women entrepreneurs deal with.
Yeah, that whole, for people who might not be totally familiar with what that is, it's like that whole feeling like you're a fraud, feeling like, okay, when is everybody going to figure out that I have no idea what I'm doing, or chalking up your accomplishments to luck or a glitch in the system or help from everybody else, when really it was you. But what's funny, Andrea, is that when I was writing the book of all the 14 habits, that was one of the ones that I felt like I didn't struggle with all that much. Like I could say no, I know that I've worked my ass off for where I'm at. Like I don't chalk it up to other people or luck or anything like that. But here's the funny thing. I found myself talking to a friend, and I said to her a couple of things. We were talking about writing, and I said, well, I kind of feel like now, since I have a second contract for a book, that now I'm a real author, because before, the first time could have just been a fluke or luck, maybe they liked my brand, and then we both started laughing because I realized what I was saying. Speaking of writing, it was because I really I feel a pull to write a memoir. And I love memoirs of hearing people's stories, and my story, the whole story is it's a Lifetime movie. It's entertaining. It's so bad it's entertaining.
Yeah.
And so, but I was telling my friend, I kept saying I'm not a memoirist. I write self-help. Anybody can write self-help. Memoirs though, that's for Cheryl Strait, that's for Elizabeth Gilbert. And my friend is like, oh my God.
You're doing it again.
Yeah. So it's nice to have people that call you out on your stuff. It's also a hazard of doing this work, but But just, I tell that story because, for those people listening who might say things like that to themselves, like, oh, now that I finally got this promotion, now I finally deserve a seat at this table. Or,
Right.
Now that I finally landed a high ticket client, now I'm a bona fide consultant or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things that so I write blog posts. That's what I used to do, so to speak. That didn't make me a writer. That was right. That was one of my things. Because when I read the book, not your book, but The Imposter Complex, I thought, well, I realized I was saying that to myself. Well, you're not really a writer just because you journal or just because you blog. It's just and using that word, you're just blogging. That's not real writing.
It is real writing. You are a writer.
Right?
Yes. Oh my goodness.
I know. But I think that those are the things. It's one of the things that I love about what did you call them? The conscious observer. Is that what you called the women who you can talk to?
Oh, compassionate witness.
Compassionate witness. That way, I don't know where I got way off on that, but I think that it's brilliant to figure out someone to be your compassionate witness, because then they really know you. And when you say, well, I'm just a blogger, they can say, well, that's writing.
Yeah, exactly. If you write, then you are a writer.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It just, takes a little bit to get that.
It does. And I think that, it isn't just one of those things where you just decide, that you are worthy of the title or anything like that. I don't want to make it seem like it's that easy. Like you and I are sitting over here just like, it's totally easy. But I think that it's just, well, of course, there's tools in the book, but I think that just talking about it to other people and saying it out loud can be tremendously helpful, because it tends to lose its power when we can laugh about it. And,
yes.
It may still kind of be one of those lingering core beliefs that pops up every once in a while. I mean, my God, I've been doing this work for a decade and that was still popping up for me. But when you realize that you're not the only one, or when you realize that other people still love you, when you have these ridiculous thoughts, it tends to lose its power.
Yeah. Okay, and then can I tell you too, I'm gonna share with you one of my favorite tools that you offer in this book, and then I want to ask you what your favorite tool is.
Yeah, go for it.
My favorite so far is the controlled emoting. I started already. I am decluttering my house, and the thing that I did is I said, you know what, my ex-husband passed away this last year, and it was rough. And, 25 years together, actually more than that, but he was my high school sweetheart. And I had to get all those pictures out because I've got a ton of his stuff now too. And I sat and cried and all these memories and everything else. And I was almost laughing at the same time, like, oh my God, it's working. This is brilliant.
Yeah.
I love that. Controlled emoting. Brilliant part.
You did that.
Love
it. And it's what it really is about is not so you can get on the other side of that and feel like, whew, glad that's all over and I'm healed. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
And I'm a true believer now. I used to not understand this at all. I was so always up in my head, and I still struggle with this from time to time. If there's a class on how to think and do your way through things, I'm signing up. But feeling your way through it, I'm
yeah.
But I do now know that our bodies are the wisest part of ourselves, and feelings are it's information, and it's also our bodies trying to expel what it needs to expel.
Yes.
If anyone has ever given birth,
yes.
You know that your body, you just surrender and your body will do all these magical things and your uterus will do its job and
yes.
you will expel that baby.
Yes.
Same thing, kind of a little bit more gross, but with throwing up or
yes.
anytime you're sick, sneezing and sweating and
all of it.
That's the same thing, crying and feeling your feelings and even anger. it's just your body trying to do what it knows how to do to get back to that place of homeostasis.
Yes.
So once I could look at it, like I love science. I went to college for science. So like I looked at it more from like a scientific.
I love it, but I do too. I do too. It's homeostasis. I totally get it.
Mm-hmm. I think that, and then, you might get triggered again. You might hear a song that was important to the two of you, or run across more pictures, and then you start that process over again. But the more you try to pretend it's not there, the more you try to like put off going through those pictures, and like it doesn't go anywhere.
No.
Like, I wish that it did, but it doesn't, damn it.
Well, and it's funny because my coach says emotion is energy in motion, and it needs to move.
It needs to move.
And it's one of the, I keep coming back to that from her, and I just think it's brilliant. So now I want to know, do you have a favorite process in your book?
You mean for
you?
Feelings?
For you, yeah.
Yeah. I think mine is probably that one too. And I journal.
Yes.
For me, it's about, because, again, I started out as a blogger too, and writing is now part of my job.
Yeah.
Writing about, feelings is part of my job. So when I sit down to write, I have to be, for myself, I have to be very intentional that this is not for anybody but me.
Yeah. Because
if I sit down to process something, like say I'm feeling really sad about my dad, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down and write about this because I'm I have the urge to write about it. And if I even get the inkling like, oh, this would be a really great podcast episode, or maybe I'll post this on my Facebook status.
Ooh.
No. Because then, even though I am like truly authentic and truly open, like, let's be honest, everybody. There's always like a little bit of bullshitter in like all of us.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care how authentic you are. We all still care a little bit about what people think of us.
Of course.
So I totally it's not even a question if this is going to go out to other people. It's a no. And those are the times that I write the most raw, unfiltered, password protect this shit because I don't want anybody to see it stuff, so that I can, and I wrote some dark, sad poetry after my dad died. I had to.
Right.
I had to.
Yeah. I
don't know if anyone will ever see that. But for the first few months, I was like, no, nobody will see this because they will lock me up. Because, just depression. It was so sad.
Yeah.
But I had to get that out so I could come out the other end.
Yep. Emotion is energy in motion. You gotta let it go. You gotta let it move through you and be what it is.
Absolutely.
I love that. Okay, so controlled emoting for you and journaling, and I love that. And do you have any sort of piece of advice that would be that someone could walk away with today? What could they start with?
Since we talked about the imposter complex, I think that what's very, many of the habits that I talk about in the book are related, and, they're kind of like in family together. Some of them are twin sisters.
Right.
And one of those twin sisters are the imposter complex and negative self-talk. So the imposter complex is negative self-talk. It's just very specific. So I would ask people to really take inventory of the way that you speak to yourself. I'm not a believer that we can completely get rid of our inner critic. I think that we all have it to some degree. I think people who live a very spiritual life, who work on this constantly, it's not that they don't have it, it's that they fall into the trap and get out very quickly.
Right.
So they recognize it so fast, so they don't stay there anymore. And that's typically what mine looks like these days. And I also know what my triggers are because I've done so much work on triggers and identities and things like that.
Right.
But for people listening, I would, break down different areas of your life. Sometimes it's too much to think about your entire life. But if you think about, for women, our biggest shame trigger tends to be our body and appearance.
Yeah.
And so, when you step out of the shower obviously with no clothes on and catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror, what does your self-talk sound like? And or if you are an entrepreneur and you have your first, I don't know, maybe you're a coach or a consultant and you send out something to a prospective client and they say no, where is your negative self-talk? Are you compassionate? recognizing it quickly? Are you letting it take you away? And the problem isn't that we have negative self-talk. The problem is what it makes us do and how it makes us feel.
Yeah.
So because it makes us feel badly, then we end up making decisions from that place. Okay, well, then I'm just going to quit this entrepreneurial thing altogether. Okay, well, since I look so terrible in the mirror, I am going to totally isolate myself for days, or, dive into this bag of Doritos and ice cream.
Right.
So it's like, that's really where it can kind of just create just not good situations in our life. But that's what I just take inventory of it. And I'm a big believer of just acknowledging it when it happens instead of bullying it back or trying to turn it into something flowery and positive, which can also be just too much of a stretch for people.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It has been wonderful to talk to you.
Why so fast?
I know, really. I know.
Hope it was that way for other people and they're not like, finally, they're done. Audrey and I had a great time.
Oh, we had a great time. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, it was wonderful. I feel like I could spend the next hour continuing to talk to you about all kinds of different things. So maybe another time.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. We can talk about the rest of the habits from the book.
I would love that. That would be awesome. But for today, just want to say thank you so much. It has been wonderful. I think everybody is going to get a ton out of what they've listened to you talk about today. I know I have, and it's been wonderful. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time, your energy, your sharing, and everything.
Thank you so much for having me on today. And thank you everyone for listening. And I'm just honored that people take the time to show up.
Thanks. All right, that's it for today. I want to give a huge thank you to Andrea. It was an outstanding interview. She was just incredible, and I hope that everybody had as much fun as I did. I definitely want to get everybody on board for the new book, because let me tell you, it's really good. How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, 14 Habits That Are Holding You Back from Happiness is wonderful. So I recommend you go buy it. Andrea is offering a free month-long book study on the book. And each week she's going to dig into new topics so that you can gain some massive self-awareness, create new, more empowering habits for yourself, and just generally feel better. She'll be guiding you every step of the way, and all you need to do is purchase the book. And then I'm going to include the link to be able to go and sign up for that free book study. The thing is, it's time sensitive. January 22nd is when it starts, so get on it. All right, that's it for today. Thanks. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, or even if you didn't, hit that subscribe button and share it with your friends. You can follow me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher at Women Are the Journey. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time.